Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Expert Dojo in the house. And I got lots to go through with you today. It's all going to be about growth like it usually is. I have a head honcho t-shirt from Expert Dojo. I've got all of our founders up here on the wall behind me. And as always, I focus on the area of growth that has most impacted me in the previous week. So, as you know, we break down the most important parts. We don't believe that anybody really fails because of lack of investment. It's normally just a symptom of either lack of success or lack of success amplification. And they are two very important different things that lead to the same place. Lack of success is obviously what it is. You're supposed to hit certain metrics to become a venture backable company. You don't hit them, you don't get there, baboom. But lack of amplified success is when you are doing great on all of every other metric, but you're not quite breaking through. So I'm going to bring on a founder in about 5 minutes or so, and they are the epitome of unbelievable success. We're going to talk about how they got to 1 million users over a very short period of time through some of the most incredible growth hacking techniques in the world, namely having an awesome product. And really great founders. But just before I go there, I want to give some feedback on Singapore, where I was last week. So Gametree, just hang in there. Everybody else, for 5 or 10 minutes, let me just run through some epic productions that happened. That is a really good growth hack. And that'll be my growth hack tip. And then we're going to dig straight into real life growth. So I went over to Token 2049. Token 2049 in Singapore is one of the largest crypto events of the year. Everybody cares about tokens, crypto, blockchain, or anything growth goes to Token 2049. It's about 20,000 people go there. And there is literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that is spent in over 800 side events. So the first growth hack is that what everybody does is, rather than go to the conference, because I didn't go to the conference, everybody creates a side event. They put the side event on the actual conference website. When they put it on the website, then they are amplified to the entire world. You can have events that are getting 3, 4, 5,000 people that are registering for the events. You like it? Good. Yeah, you can have like 3, 4, 5,000 people that are actually coming to the events because of the amplification, because Token 2049 is a monster. So first growth hack is, whenever you have a monster friend, jump in on the back of your friend, leverage all of the publicity and everything they're having. Number two, there are then two types of founders. Those founders who maybe don't do an event, they go to lots of events, or maybe they host a party or something. Lots of people come and they feel really happy. And then there are those type of founders who launch very specific events that build their domain dominance. Now, one of our companies, Zeev, over there this year, hosted a monster event. And the idea was that it was going to cost them a little bit of money because they had it in the ballroom of a nearby hotel, but they got just as much money in from sponsors. Second growth hack. A lot of the great events and productions that you do, other people will pay for. Use other people's money to be able to build your domain expertise. Number three, the event that they created wasn't just a party. They're in the roll-up space. They're building their name in the roll-up space so everybody can get to know them. And they brought in CEO of Polygon, which is obviously a huge company, COO of ZK, which is monster roll-up, and they brought in the biggest names in the space. So it didn't matter who was in the audience watching what they were doing, even though they ran that really well. What mattered was they brought all these partners in, and they leveraged themselves up to that level. So during the conference, we had multiple other events. Some people did dinners, some people did events where they brought investors in. Everybody pretty much pulled together in one place so that they can make sure that they leverage themselves to the absolute max. So as you go to conferences, I personally believe just going to a conference to walk around is a waste of time. Don't waste your time, right? Stay at home, do emails, do whatever you're going to do. If you're going to go there, leverage on the back of other people who are spending a ton of money to make sure that they get people, and then get all of your contacts, keep all of your contacts, follow up with all of your contacts, and make sure you maximize them all. Okay, enough from me. I'm going to bring in two unbelievably strong founders who are building one of the greatest platforms in gaming, period, maybe in social media, period, like all of it. And then I'm so glad you had time for us. I know you're so busy getting awards these days. It's nice to see that you make time for humble little me. I appreciate
Oh
it.
my God.
I appreciate it.
I'll find time for you in any situation. You know how much we love you and how much I personally adore you.
Thank you. And John, you see what I did with me was like, even with my little bit of brilliance, I always kept other people around me like really low so I could feel good in the day. It must be impossible getting like parties and everything else.
You
It's like,
figured it out. Welcome back from Token.
thank you, my friend. It was pretty epic. Yes. You need
So
to
many
go
people. I
there.
feel like everyone was there.
Yes, you need to be there. You need to be at the next one, Dubai, because it's true. And they're all about, what's so amazing about how you built Gametree. I'll let you talk a bit about Gametree in a second, but like how you built out Gametree through just amazing community. That's kind of what crypto is. Like leaving aside the noise and the crap and whatever tokens, whatever that happens within the tokens, everything is really about building community to like whatever extent that they want that community to be built to. So it's actually really beautiful to be around. And I mentioned like three of the growth hacks, but one of the really impressive growth hacks, which was incredible, was there's a company called Redacted. And Redacted are they were nobody a little while ago, but then they did a NFT, and their NFTs were actually really good. And the only way we got to speaking to them was we actually got an NFT, which the NFT increased in value. But the NFTs were like 10, 15 grand. So they were not cheap. But then the reason we got it was because we saw they were going to be getting really big. And so even though we know a lot of the OGs in the space, we heard rumors that these guys were going to charter a plane. Did you hear about this?
Is this the one you flew over there on?
Yeah, it is.
It was good.
It's payback.
So it was really interesting. Like you can go on social media and see a ton of comments on like all about it. And there were some that were really good and some that maybe were not so good. Because I think it broke into karaoke at the end of the evening, and Emirates Airlines had never really had karaoke on their planes before.
Whoa.
But you know what they did manage, which was incredible? They got 200 influencers and KOLs and 100 investors, and they got them all to Dubai before Singapore. They then created this like monster event in Dubai. They then got everybody back to a hotel the next morning and had like 150 cars waiting for them to take everybody to the airport. Then when you arrived at the airport, they already had all your boarding passes and everything in place. And then you just got onto the plane, and then you spent 10 hours which for some people would be hell. I actually really liked it, bizarrely. But you spent like 10 hours with all of these other people who are all going to exactly the same conference.
It's
What's a
already
pre-party?
started over there.
It started like days beforehand. And then when we got there, they had another event which they had up in this huge place in Singapore. So by the time we arrived in Singapore, everybody already had a ton of love for Redacted. And now, as they build out an ecosystem fund, which they're going to do, and they're going to incubate a bunch of companies. Now, people were pitching to me in the air, which they kind of moved around business class. It was very funny and like super bizarre, but it was cool. And I think we are in the time of experiences right now. I think people are so depressed, bored, just hating the hate in the world, that they just want to do nice, fun things that involve other people in real life. So I'm waiting for the Gametree awesome hack that we're going to do at the next conference, because it's going to be good.
You know,
Can you do?
I keep saying that there's the difference between just group of people and community. It's actually about like how often and how pleasure is they experience with each other. Because like if it's around something that you really like bring you joy or bring you fun, and like flying together, like doing these adventures together, it's really unites you.
It's totally true. You don't build community is such a cheaply used word. And everybody said, oh, I'm going to build community. We're going to build community, which is going to be a foundation for our platform. And everybody's going to really like it, and it's going to be good. But it's just not true. Community is actually really hard work. If you build a proper community, you'll never lose your fan base. Like I always think, like back in the early days, Patagonia were maybe the greatest community of all time. Nobody leaves them. Even if people don't like their clothes, they still don't leave them. They stay because what it represents to them is really good. In the crypto community, like the Shiba Inu coin is like an incredibly strong community. And I think in the gaming community, what's emerging to be one of the hottest communities in the world is the Gametree community.
Yeah. Speaking to that a bit,
Yeah.
so in Gametree, you can find friends, which is sort of a core of community. And our intention is to then release a feature where we scale individual matching, which is what Gametree does really well, is finding people with similar values, personalities, play
John,
styles.
can you go back just a step further and just tell us, like, what was the genesis of why you created this? I remember I was reading, and I obviously know a ton of stuff about you and the building and how you did it, but it just, this was almost reminded to me by when I was reading about Dana, and I was reading about like how she was like, you know, in military service, and she was thinking that there's a better future and she'll go through, and she like protecting everything that's holy and wonderful about the Ukraine, and at the same time knowing that there's a better future for everyone. And I can kind of see how that builds into the community. But what about you? Like when, or back in the early days, because you were over in the Ukraine as well, you were both over there together.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about the emotional journey that you went through to build that Gametree before you had your squillions of millions of followers.
So I had organized like a living operation with a lot of my best friends, and it was amazing. And then after graduating college, I moved to Irvine where I didn't know anybody. And I went from being like the happiest in my life to like the least happy because I basically didn't have community. I was in a new city. I struggled to make friends in real life, and I'd noticed that with gaming, that besides working, I would just go play games online by myself. And in the past, I'd be playing with friends more. Or like in the early days of Counter-Strike, you'd play and you'd join a community server. You get to know people, your friends are there, you get like you hang out in between matches, and it's just more organic to get to know people. And that makes gaming more fun and more meaningful because you're building relationships while having fun. But the gaming industry has changed a lot with instant queue matching, where nowadays you're just thrown in with a bunch of random people. There's a lot of toxicity. You go from game to game. So it's a very lonely kind of like negative experience a lot of the time. And just through the game designers trying to make the game faster and more dopamine, they kind of killed a lot of the social aspect of gaming. So for me, Gametree was about finding friends to play these games with because it's become so much harder to do in game, especially with a bias towards really curating people extremely deeply. Because just a random person, like what all the other apps have done, isn't really that much a predictor of who you're going to be friends with, what kind of community you'll like. But on Gametree, we'll look at your personality psychology, your personal values, common tastes, having a high number and proportion of games in common. So you really not just play with somebody that you'll like playing with, but somebody who might become like your next best friend.
I really like that. Dan, anything to add there for you?
Well, I think John had very personal problem that he faced. It's loneliness, especially this period of time when you moving somewhere, when you like moving on transition from university to work, and the whole world kind of falling apart. And
Yeah.
having community at that point, it can be one of the base that you can rely on. And it's very important. It's like fundamental human need. We wasn't evolved to be by ourselves. We was evolved to live in the tribe. And one of the slogan that we use is Gametree, find your tribe, because that's eventually what was our mission.
Yeah, so when it comes to games, or just so many things, like when you speak to community, if you play like a massive multiplayer game, for example, or let's say you're getting into blockchain, you're curious about a new token or app, like the fastest, best way to really get in there is to find friends who share the interest. Like they're going to onboard you, you're going to develop a relationship around a product or a game. And alongside our health, our relationships are the most important thing in the world. So finding those like early connections early is really going to help. Like massive multiplayer games are on average like inferior games. What makes them special is the social aspect that makes them really good. If you look at all the most successful games now, like Roblox, Minecraft, things like that, they all have highly potentially rich social spaces that if you don't actively engage or happen to know some people they're already connected to, you just totally miss out on. They're not nearly as good and sticky as they can be. If you're buying cosmetics to show off, like they're not cool if you don't have people to show them off to. When it comes to Web3, especially, community is like extra powerful. Not only does it help with the retention and getting people's foot in the door, but you have asset prices and liquidity that are extremely important. So because of those, community is extra important. So right now, Gametree is about finding gamer friends. You can find, you can tag a game, for example, and find people who are playing that game that you'd really like. But part of our roadmap next, after we just raised more funding, is to make it so you can actually put in like any product, chain, game, whatever you want, and actually find people based on that sub community, or even linking to communities themselves and having them discoverable, because every day hundreds of people are coming to Gametree to discover communities or to promote their communities. But that's not something that is as officially endorsed right now. So just by scaling our best in class individual matching, we can help people discover clans or games or products that they would love the most out of a really massively crowded world.
Wonderful. And I'm going to jump in a second into growth, because this stream is all about the fastest growing companies in the world and like how you're doing what you're doing. But I felt a little bit about the community that you're talking about on the weekend. One of the companies we invested in, as you know, is M80. And M80 got the franchise spot in Rainbow Six Siege, which was really nice about half a year or so ago. And for anybody who's not in, like, everything is kind of getting those franchise spots, because if you get them, you're not poor anymore, technically, right? If you don't get them, it is a brutal journey of trying to like go from like game to game to game to game to play against people. And so M80 built out a beautiful brand, really strong community. They got last year, they went to Ascension, which is the playoffs to get into the Valorant, the franchise league, which Riot Games run. And they got all the way to the final. And then they had a match point in the final, and then they lost on the same map like a little bit later on, and it was like devastating, because the team they lost to then subsequently disbanded the next day, which was even worse. This year they went back in again, went back into Ascension, went through the same thing, got into the final, played, lost 3-2 in the final. The worst, right? And so they were devastated. But what was really nice was the reaction of the fans to it. So the fans looked at it and spoke about it. And when you go into Twitter, you can see how communities come together. So I think it's really, really hard to build these communities. But when you build these communities, even with gamers that are probably the most brutal and hard of all people, when it comes to losses or anything else, they still, when you build a great community, they'll stick by you. Thoughts on community and on that type of feel within gaming itself? Is it usual, unusual? And then I want to kick into, how did you build your brand from no users, no community, no anything, all the way up to 1 million downloads within such a short period of time? I want to talk about growth, and then of course how that then led to you being able to raise a ton of investment as well. But thoughts on community first, on M80, Valorant, different types of teams. How difficult or hard is it to build what they've built, where they get kind of forgiven and loved at the same time when they lose?
Well, I think the way how we should think about community and building communities in many ways is similar how to build your brand, and because eventually they're very related to your reputation and what people talk about you when you are not around them, when they talking between each other. And there's interesting thing that, you know, in the root of word community, it's a word common. So people need to be united around something that brings them in common, and as many aspects they have, as more strong your community will be. And what we started, I think what was an idea of Gametree, is that we need to unite people, not just like random or just about like some specific game, but try to find you somebody on who you will accept as a person, or who you will share similar values with, or who you have compatible personalities. So we collect many data points and go super deep into understanding our user first, and then try to find people who would share as many things in common with them as possible, and bring these people together and give them incentives to play and meet with each other in repeated interaction.
Yeah. So for example, with esports, like that's what you're speaking to. Esports is a fragment of the gaming industry, and different kinds of communities are completely different. Like if you take esports players and drop them into Minecraft, they're not going to get along. Or even if you take like certain games like World of Warcraft, like there's a huge spectrum of the types of communities that exist. So really, it's about finding not just like a common interest, but a lot more in common that really makes you tribe up and feel like you're safe, you like these people, you get along. Gaming has been increasingly getting more and more toxic, as just people in general. The world's getting lonelier. But insight that we've had is that people aren't necessarily actually getting more toxic. What's really happening is that random people are getting together more, Or organically, we tribe up, you know, your neighbors, you go to like a school or something, like you know people that are more predictable, common culture. But as time goes on and we're moving around more and more separated, we're just rubbing up against people that are very different. And most of this toxicity is just miscommunications between people. For example, if one person is okay with swearing and another's not, one person's really competitive, one person's casual. Nobody's wrong, they're just different. And because of that, they're fighting a lot. And that is counterproductive when you're trying to form community and have good experiences, like you're saying.
Yeah, and also I imagine when people are hiding behind avatars and not even enjoying behind avatars, right? People will say things that they wouldn't normally say if
Yeah.
they were standing in front of someone. So the environment just enables itself for the worst part of us to come out. And so it was the genesis of why you built it makes entire sense. Actually, it's a really beautiful thing because you're taking an entire generation and allowing them to enjoy what they love, but at the same time, kind of steer them very gently without even people realizing them into a really nice place where they turn into awesome human beings as well. But then how do you grow that? Like I get the community piece of getting them in thing, but specifically, what did you do at the beginning to get your first 50 or 100,000 users?
I think
The
as
first,
John should start
yeah.
this one.
So originally, initiating it, I was in San Francisco, which turned out to be like the worst place to start a tech company. It's good, like later stage, but the cost of living is high. It's hard to recruit people competing against big tech. And the last piece is that it's really hard to get early users. It's very expensive to advertise. There's huge amounts of competition. So moving to Ukraine made everything so much easier. And the side effect was actually an accident about the user's part, where almost every product sucks when you first release it. Like the world's really complicated, it's very competitive. So the first couple MVPs weren't very good. But in Ukraine, it's easier to like advertise to get initial core. You can go to conferences and you can have like a booth for like less than $100. Whereas in San Francisco, it's completely not possible. So getting that initial user base gave us the amount of feedback that we could have to iterate on the product to a point where it just started naturally grow around the world.
And by the way, I just want to stop you there because what you've just said is such a hugely insightful point. Most people go to San Francisco because they spent all of their time looking for investment. And when you're spending all of your time looking for investment, you're distracted away from what really is the main point of what you're doing, which is to find beautiful users who are going to adore your product and tell you all of the things that you need to do to make it perfect. So I love the fact that you actually moved away from the place that is perceptually has all of the money and to the place that can allow you to have the maximum engagement with your user. I think there's just a monster lesson there for everyone. Don't get distracted by the shiny stuff. Focus on your customer, show your customer the love and get it back again. Keep
Yeah, and
going.
for the audience, there's over 1 million signups now. So there should definitely be people in Dubai, basically anywhere in the world now. There'll be people and there's thousands signing up every day. We have no marketing team and we're not doing any paid promotions.
Actually, Emirates is, I believe, in our top 10 countries. So yes, we do. And I've heard couple different startups that been trying to do community building in Emirates, and I think gaming is very promising in that region.
It's on fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
Emirates is going great right now. They're putting a ton of money. Saudi Arabia putting a ton of money in. Dubai have been putting a ton of money in for ages. I think they're trying to own esports. I actually find it really now that I'm getting so deep into esports because we have M80. I just find it really funny. Like Saudi Arabia do the esports World Cup, but they put like 20 of their teams in, and there's 2 teams from outside. So I like it. When you're going to rig it that hard, it means that you're like super deep into it. And I think you made the point, John, like 1 million users, that's monster. How did you do that though? Like you didn't spend much money on marketing. You went over to the Ukraine, you focused on the user, but how did those first like 50, 100,000 people find out about you? Were you walking around the street with flyers? Were you like going onto chat rooms? You go into Reddit, you hang in gaming places? Where'd you go?
Everything, a lot of the early startup wisdom is do things that don't scale for the early stage. So it is conferences, it was flyers, it was going to like Reddit, Facebook groups, posting on YouTube comments, just like a few of us just kind of scrounging people here and there. Again, getting the feedback. And then as the product got better, it just starts to naturally scale because the world is big and Gametree is the best at what it does in its niche of like really deeply connecting the right people together.
Love that.
I can share a little bit more about how we scale it and put it more into sustainable roadmap. I mean
Please.
growth, because for a very long time growth was our main metrics that we was looking for, that we was going to and was optimized for. And of course it's all starts with the product. There's different strategies. If you go with the paid marketing, it's one completely different strategy we choose, and the core of our product require for us to be organic and be market driven. So we put a lot of attention to our product and spend tons of A/B tests, try to make onboarding as smooth as possible, try to make user experience, but from the start as easy, and then find the markets that have the biggest problem and localize our product to them. And we have amazing community that help us translate our app to 10 different languages, which also bring us people from all over the world. And I think we spend a lot of time building our brand and talking with users on the language that they want to hear. And unfortunately, there wasn't like one simple answer, and it wasn't the smooth journey. We did a lot of mistakes. We probably spent a bunch of time without result, and our effort trying to do stuff that didn't really work for us. For example, I can it's our story. I'm not necessarily sure it's gonna be relevant for every other product, but we thought for quite some time that maybe our user will find us easily in social media, because Instagram can give you big, space to talk with users. TikTok can give you big space to talk with users. But what we find out that for our users, there was many other options to talk with them. For example, YouTube or blogs and or Reddit was more helpful for us versus like Instagram and TikTok. And you can't know it in advance. You can learn it only through trying and putting effort into it and see what works. It's like you you have different theories and then you testing them and see what works.
Yeah.
We
And
spend a lot of yeah.
oh, go ahead. I was going to answer Sunil's question.
Sure, keep going.
So Sunil, so we just closed some more investment and we're finishing up a round right now. The shift of the product is going from being a gamer matching app more towards building an ecosystem. Our goal is to essentially build like the central gamer network. There's so many different platforms and ecosystems, chat apps, but there's no way to like post a story, for example, and like tag a game and share it with your friends. There isn't like a good universal friends list, a universal games list. There isn't a good discovery thing to like know what are the best options across all the different platforms. So because Gametree is doing the best individual matching and people find friends, it's a good place to then continue those relationships, adding more user-generated content, gameplay coordination. So the way to grow in India as well as the rest of the world moving forward is less about growth hacks, or I guess it is a growth hack, but it's really about product-driven growth, where we're going to be adding more and more features that are naturally viral. We talked about community recommendations. Community leaders are recommended to put their like a link to their communities on Gametree. It could be a Discord channel, it could be like even a Twitch stream or a YouTube channel, a LinkedIn group, whatever. And we'd recommend that to the right kinds of people. But to know who those people are, those leaders need to invite some of their followers so that we can kind of get the DNA of their audience and recommend it to similar people. So there's this selfish incentive loop for these people with big audiences to share Gametree, knowing that it'll help them expand their audiences, not just people in general, but to the right kinds of people that match their existing fans. Another example is user-generated content. Like if there's more ways to share content and to see what your friends are up to, then suddenly you have more of a selfish reason to invite friends. Gameplay coordination, you want to have an easier time coordinating, having calls that overlay games and such easier and faster than Discord. Suddenly there's somebody, a random person in the group, it's easy to share a link, suddenly they've discovered Gametree. So in India, we expect, as with the rest of the world, a lot more of these sort of loops to just start creating exponential growth and pretty much hyper scaling into the next year.
And just to make sure everybody's following, so we talked about the first thing, go to where your customer is. It may sound very basic. It's not basic. Hardly anybody does it. Everybody else spends all of their time just asking for money. Actually going into the market to finding out where the customer is a huge thing. The second point that John brought up, and then he just elaborated on it a little bit, is the fact that most people don't spend the time Lots of people spend the money. The problem is when you spend the money, you don't get deep in with your conversation with your customers. But when you spend the time trying to find your customers, you build that beautiful product. So it's all about building beautiful product. Like, consumers are not stupid. They want what they want, and they know what's beautiful when they see it. And so give them that. And you spend all of your time adapting until somebody's like, wow, that was an amazing experience. Hold on. Is that an amazing experience just for you, or is it going to be an amazing experience for a bunch of other people? Because if it's a bunch of other people, now we know what to build. And like, by iterating that lovable product, and this is the difference. So a lot of people say to me all the time, like, you keep talking about lovable product versus minimum viable product. This is the difference between minimum viable product, which is giving some kind of crap out to the world, and lovable product, where it is continually simple, transformative, and complete. And all you're doing is you're just iterating on the loop over and over and over again as you're getting the feedback from the customers. So I love what you just, when you even went back to there and said, John, is like, just give them exactly what they want and what they need, because they can't tell you what that is, but their reactions and their emotions will revive it as soon as it comes through.
Yeah,
Danny,
Michelangelo.
Oh yeah, go on. No,
Uh,
go on.
sorry,
Go on.
So Michelangelo has a saying that inside of every piece of stone is like a statue, and it's the job of the sculptor to discover it. It's like you're uncovering it. And in business and startups, it's like there's a perfect form of a product that could exist. And your job as an entrepreneur is to discover what is this perfect form. And customer feedback is basically your senses of being able to feel out that shape. There's two major traps that early stage founders fall into. One is fundraising too early. Fundraising is all about traction and de-risking the company. And investors don't invest in the idea, they invest in mostly the traction and the founder's reputation of having accomplished things. So you want to look at what are the things that you can get rid of, and user adoption is like the number one problem that companies can face, is not lacking that traction and product market fit. The other one, so there's fundraising too soon. The other one is spending money on users too much early on. Because unless you're getting a return on investment on those users, or you have really, really long retention, it's basically just burning cash. And that's cash that you could be spending on improving the product and the experience.
Spoken with
Totally.
the experience of
In
multiple
general, I think for a very long time, especially early company, of course, there's different business model and approaches, but on average, I would say that it's a mistake to spend money to paid user acquisition too early, because not just the users that you will require will not provide you enough data, because they will be less loyal. They have less personal problem to come and find solution that could be your product. So they, by the start, will give you a little bit misleading information. They wouldn't be perfect match for your first early adopters. And as in anything, I think, Ryan, you said this earlier, community-driven products and community-driven growth start from early adopters who feel the pain very painful, and then they find solution inside you. And if they couldn't find solution, they try different things. We had competitors also in the market. There was already some apps trying to do this, but they was suck. And then they find Gametree, who actually ask them about themselves, who actually try to understand them and try to satisfy their need. They felt grateful. And this is what you're trying to have from community, this feeling that, oh, I'm grateful that someone over there solved my problem. And that's how I became your advocate, and that's how I'm telling my friends who I play some other games, oh, let's go to Gametree and find some, like, one person that we're missing. And right now, about 40% of all our users come to Gametree through recommendation, through other people advocate us behind our back.
I love that. And also, by the way, I'll just again underline hack number 3, which is one to many. And so what they're doing is they're almost like building a sandwich as they're creating it. One side of it is just showing love to their end user, and then continually finding out what they need and continually striving to provide it, if that's the truth, that will actually fit nicely into the platform. And the other end is getting the community leaders, and that is the one to many, by getting all of those community leaders on and then encouraging them to bring on their people, because they know that they can grow that audience and become a major influencer on the platform. But in doing so, they're bringing tens of thousands of people who otherwise would have never heard about the platform. So it is an absolutely incredible hack to do that. I love that. What else? And then I want to get to how you're going to go from 1 million users to 10 million users, because honestly, it kind of seems easier to me.
I would say another big insight that we discovered not that long time ago, growing organically, like 100% organically for a very long time. And then when we reach some point about like 600,000, we kind of like start seeing that like it's growing slower than we want. And then we start experimenting different things. And as we've been very against paid user money to acquire users, as we figure out that like later on in the stage when you already have a product, when you already have quite some community interaction, do not spend any money for marketing. It's actually a big, because you still need to be very focused on like having majority of users 80-90% organic, but just like having a little bit of spend. And this is just because we live in a world like that. If you don't pay anything to Apple, if you don't pay anything to like Google, you just being punished by platforms and being lower on a on the search, and there's nothing you can do with it. Just like put a little bit budget, put like, I don't know, $10 per day or something like that, and you will see significant result by literally changing nothing. But just because this is a business for them as well, like they doing money out of it. So I said it a mistake to go with a paid user acquisition and spend tons of money for users from the start. As well, it's a mistake to believe that, oh, I can spend no money and still keep growing as fast as I grow from the start. So you do need to have like professional people on your team who would see and speak the same language as your users speak, who will create a common message that you send through all your socials, so you wouldn't mislead, that you would have very strong differentiation for very strong image. Who are you and how's you're different from anyone else? And find right place to put your name into, find right collaborations with different influencer, for example, work with extra credit. I know how many of us over here is gamers. John, maybe you will share a little bit more about that project.
Yeah, well, they're basically, so far as I know, like the best YouTube channel for indie game developers, and they were interested in gamer matching in games, not just looking at skill and ping, but also who people are. And if you're going to play with people for like a match or for hours, it's important, the social element, if you're going to get along with the people. Brian, speaking to your question about scaling from 1 million to 10 million users, it's definitely the case that at different stages of the company, different strategies make sense. Kind of like, let's say you are starting working in life. Your labor is the most valuable thing you have, but as you have more money, it's more about reinvesting the money you've already earned as the best way to make money. It's similar with the startup, where at the early stage, you want to do things that don't scale. Like, for example, bugging your family and friends. Like, that only goes so far, but that's the easiest, best early thing you can do. They're going to be more loyal. They're going to have your back. So with Gametree, a lot of it was like, going to conferences, meeting people in person and stuff like that. But that only gets you so far. But that's really good at the beginning, building those personal connections and getting the word out in ways that aren't super expensive. The next stage for us was a lot about like search engine optimization, app store optimization, making sure that all the people that are looking for Gametree, that have this problem proactively, are finding Gametree. The next stage, a part of that is also virality along the way, but the next stage is really doubling down on the viral growth, where it's more about building these self-interest engines where people have selfish reasons to invite and share Gametree with their friends and communities, clans, things like that. And then as time goes on, it'll scale to the point where as we're kicking in monetization more, it'll be more about like mass advertising and even just paid acquisition, because we're getting an ROI there. And because a lot of the users we've already tapped into might have already tapped their networks.
And
I
one
love
more
it.
thing that
Go
I
on.
would add, it might sound not very sexy or value driven, but more like data driven. It's not just a word, but like really people who want to do growth properly, you should find either platforms, either figure out your own way how you will track data. What is right now your main channel that brings you users if your product is already on the market? And then instead of like going to channels that not really naturally bring you bring you users to the product, go with the channels that already is performing good, that already working, and then try to scale more. It's like low hanging fruit because it's already working. If you will put more attention to this, it will give you better result first.
And what I'm hearing all the way through this stream is that marketing is not an amateur sport. It's something you got to take really seriously. If you're a founder and you just think you got a nice idea and you're going to do okay, it's not going to work. If you're a founder who just think you can go to a marketing agency and pay a marketing agency to do paid advertising and you're going to buy your customers, it's not going to work. You got to take this thing seriously or you are definitely going to fail. And that's like the pure beauty of watching you grow from like nothing to 1 million downloads. Like it's an insane amount of downloads that you've got through. So talk to us, because you've done so well, you've not really had a problem raising money. There's obviously always investors who are listening to this as well. And they're listening because they want to hear who are the fastest growing companies in the portfolio, of which you are right at the top of the tree. And so talk to us a little bit about how the investment has gone, how those investors have found you, because I think you've not spent a ton of time looking for investors. Most of the time, it's actually them reaching out to you rather than the other way around. And then what comes next? What does like the end of 2024 and 2025 look like, both from a user perspective, from an investment perspective, and maybe even from a revenue perspective as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that we haven't really spoken on, but that could make sense depending on the companies and being creative, is partnerships, driven growth. Gametree has some monetization opportunities that work for a lot of companies, the gaming industry in general, but everything applies extra powerfully to Web3, which is being able to do user acquisition. We collect massive, massive amounts of data because we curate people and they fill in personality tests and stuff. So you can find lookalike users, drive them, building communities around tokens, games, and chains, and also providing this data then like in aggregate with all these companies that don't know much about who their fans are. So we were talking to a company, Futureverse. So this hasn't been like publicly announced yet, but they're a giant Web3 ecosystem. They own the rights to Ready Player One, which is the best IP for a metaverse that they're building. It's $1 billion operation with hundreds of projects in development right now to basically connect all these different things together to create the metaverse. Unlike Meta, where they kind of want to build it and monopolize it, they're doing the other approach, which is more like crowdsourcing everything, which is, regardless of what anybody else does, always going to be a part of the thing, if not the dominant one. So for them, they saw Gametree as an integral part of connecting gamers, integrating, getting Web2 users to be able to experience Web3 in a good way, knowing the games they'll like, having friends, connecting everything. So as part of like heavy demand from the Web3 industry for all these services, when we told Futureverse that we're starting to raise, they immediately said we want to lead the round. So we just closed their funds last week, and so we were pausing the round to have that in the bank because to have that in the bank because it just makes everything faster and easier once the lead is already closed. So yeah, now we're just moving forward with that step.
And I would say
Monster.
also to that point, I would add that even though you're not like from the start when you don't have network or you don't have that strong reputation or name, you definitely should not just should like sitting and waiting. You should go outside and talking with people and tell them about what you're doing, and maybe not necessarily like selling, but at least share with other people. This is how we met Brian, by the way, and that was a life-changing event.
Yeah. If you're ever in LA, by the way, like Brian hosts like the best events like in all of LA, and he created most of the LA gaming ecosystem. Like he was early, just connecting people. He's like so giving. So if you ever have an opportunity to work with him or do dojo or anything, like he's like 10 out of 10. Like I don't know how he has the energy for it all, how he tracks and remembers
Wow.
so much. His fingers
You,
are on like
you, you
every pie.
created it. You created it. You just allowed me to be at the party. That was all.
And he let us host some parties in at the space, which is amazing, beautiful spot in Santa Monica, like really prime,
They,
good
they were
crowd.
they were so much
Yeah.
fun. You did so
Um,
many things really that so much. It's even hard to remember. I imagine from the beginning, you were over in the Ukraine, then you know that those terrible atrocities broke out, and then came over here, and then you were going backwards and forwards. And not only have you like survived through that, but you've built such an incredible company. And I do really think that like going from getting to 1 million without really focusing a lot on raising money, just focusing on the user and on the user experience and everything that has to be done to build that, because that's the hardest build. That was the hard piece. When do you, what's your view going forward on like how you're going to grow to that like 2 million and 5 million and 7 million? And is that the way you want to do it? Or are you looking to go wider?
We're definitely
we
looking to go wider.
Yeah, so
and
the
bigger.
vision for Gametree is like the central gamer network. So we want Gametree to be a household name just across the planet that every gamer has an account for. Right now, like it's such a missed opportunity. Like back to the origin story, for me personally, of like playing games alone, it's so much more fun and meaningful when you're building memories, you're hanging out with friends. Like it's not just like a waste of time. I mean, it's not totally a waste of time, but over time, if you're doing it too much, it is. But if you're actually building relationships and connecting that deeply, it's way more productive. So it really is about building this sort of an ecosystem that's kind of like a home between all the different games and ecosystems, and building this sort of platform that it makes sense that anybody you meet in the game, you're like, hey, what's your game tree? I want to add you. Oh, let's play again. You coordinate it through Game Tree. You can get rewarded with tokens. It gives you badges for making friends from different countries with different personalities for doing well. Really just kind of like gamifying and making it a lot easier and better to not just meet people, but to play together and stay in touch out of game.
Anything to add, Dana?
Um, there are some basic things that probably a lot of people already know. Try to find incentives inside your app to people to invite their friends. For example, we give rewards for friend invitation. If you have membership for inviting friends, you can give them discount for membership, or you can give them free membership for some period of time. Simple things. Try to find some funny moments, or maybe some funny like things that people would like to take screenshot and put in their social media. That would be with your logo. It's very simple to do, but again, if anyone over here already read some basic growth, it's very on the top of it. Another one is that even though both of us that we do not really into paid user acquisition, there is good things that you can do through advertisement, and it's validation of different theories. For example, you have 5 different ideas. What's the key value for your potential users? You can start 5 different small advertisement campaign with a simple budget of like $5, and then see the metrics, click-through rate, for example, and that will give you information, and then like specify very target audience that you're looking for. And then you can see by metrics that you'll have in the end of the day, what is the value proposition, have the biggest click from customers. That's, I think, the only one good use of Facebook ads.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Another strategy going forward too is more partnerships. Early stage, it's hard to partner for most use cases because if you're like, let's say Microsoft, like it doesn't make sense to partner with a little company. It's hard to be reliable. The brands aren't recognized. You might not be able to deliver enough value. Gametree's gotten to the stage now with over 1 million signups and growing quickly that we can make bigger and bigger partnerships. So, for example, with Futureverse, they're developing a Future Pass, which is a universal chain, a universal login system for the Web3 industry that kind of creates and connects a metaverse. Gametree is doing something similar with the gaming industry about creating a universal sign-in system so you can track all your games and friends and data across the gaming industry. So that's something we'll be rolling out, and that's also a growth hack because people that want to, let's say, have their community networked and to build community through Gametree have an incentive to push Gametree or to have it as a login system. Or if they want data on the users, that makes better services, being able to improve the products, to build a market better, that gives them a selfish incentive to share Gametree. So those sorts of partnerships are going to also be a part of our future growth.
Amazing. And look, obviously, couldn't be prouder, happier, or more filled with love to have you guys part of our portfolio. I'm so sure you're going to build one of the most important pieces of gaming that exists in the world, like period. Fill in. You did your pre-seed round, no problem. Now your seed round, you've got a lead from one of the legends in Web3. What have you anything left? I mean, there will be investors who are listening to this. What's left to maybe fill in? And if you're speaking to an investor now, the last 2 minutes or 30 seconds or 1 minute is for between you and them. What would you say to them about what you're building and what the vision looks like in the future? And if there is any investment left in the round now, and if not, what they can possibly hope to get in the future?
One thing is that we feel like we're ready to go. We know what to build. We just want to be working on the product, working on the company. Fundraising is a distraction. So we just want to close the funds and keep running because this is a very big opportunity. There is a very big hesitation around social plays because so many people in the past tried to build social networks and failed. Where Gametree is different is people come to Gametree primarily as a tool to find friends. And so the cold start chicken and egg problem is already solved by people finding all these friends through the platform and are there because they want social connection. They want to develop these relationships. Gaming has been blowing up. Loneliness is increasing. Toxicity is increasing. Like the market timing is really good. The big players can't do it themselves because they have conflicts of interest. Like if Unity does it, Unreal won't want to play, or if like Microsoft does it, Sony won't cooperate. So it has to be an independent company. We have massive user trust. We have huge amounts of data for curating user-generated content and for connecting gamers, which is, for example, how TikTok, the latest success, became successful. So we really have a perfect storm of all these things where we wanted to stay away from the space because it's so hard and challenging, but we just have like the perfect storm available for such a massive multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So really, like, we think we know what to do. It's going to start scaling a lot because we have very unique and individuated product roadmap that is just going to add massive value. And a last piece that I'm going to say is that a lot of companies add value to users' lives, but Gametree is a bit special in that, like I said at the beginning, like alongside our health, our relationships are so important, and loneliness is really skyrocketing. And the kinds of endorsements and user feedback and evangelism that we get is really, really, really touching. So if there's any element of impact, we get people telling us like, "Hey, I was really lonely and depressed, and I now have the life that I always wanted and never thought I could have because of Gametree." Like you don't get those sorts of
You don't. And that's
yeah.
by the way, what you're describing is the ultimate in brand, which is where deep purpose meets transformative impact. It's like it's the holy grail that nobody gets when you have a platform that can reach how many gamers in the world are there? A billion, 2 billion?
Half the world population plays games, but it's a sliding scale.
Yeah. So even
A
if we
few
say like
billion.
a couple of billion people. So Dana finishes off. How much have we got left in the round, and how quick do folks have to be?
Well, right now we have about 1.5 remaining in the round. We're closing 3 million this time, but next week I'm actually flying to Amsterdam because there's investor who offer us oversubscribed round for 4 million, and they want to close it. So maybe we have only 1 week left. I don't know. We'll
Good,
see. It's
good. That's what I like to hear. That's right, because that's what a million users gets you, because you're killing it right now. Look, you both are killers. You're stone cold killers. You're building an amazing platform. That growth from like a million to 2 million to 5 million to 10 million to 100 million is direct and it is straight, and you are on that road. For any startups who've been listening to us, you just had a masterclass on how to build out your company, from making sure that you find your customers where they are, to building a beautiful product that they need, to sandwiching between partners and also users to keep on growing in between, to then going onto the platforms where your users are on and making sure that you're building that community, which kind of cocoons everybody all the way through, and not focusing all of your time on either investment or trying to be an amateur marketer. Be incredible at finding your customers and be mediocre at looking for investors, but an expert at letting them know how well you're doing. That is why they are crushing it. So investors, you can reach out to me or John or Dana. You want to give an email that folks can reach out to you directly on?
sure. Or you can just like add us on LinkedIn. I think our names is right over there.
Yeah, or Dana at Gametree.me or Juke, Juke at Gametree.me. Variety of ways to connect. Brian, thank you so much for having us on and for enabling all this growth that we've had.
Oh, yeah. Like it's hard to bring on a unicorn? Hello, fine, okay.
I think, Brian, what you have is like you see what other people don't see, and you give us, you saw us very early in our way, and you like, oh, these guys will do it, and we're very grateful for it.
I actually think that's a little bit true, only sometimes, but like sometimes stuff is so obvious to me. Like it's so obvious to me. You're both stone cold killers. You're both amazing executors. You're both do exactly what you say you're going to do all the time. You found something that's like such a huge pain point in the world. Everybody sees it now, of course, but to me, it was like obvious at the beginning, and I am so happy that you guys are doing what you're doing. So